Hello, and welcome to The Green Team, the weird little spin-off podcast where patrons of the Legendarium talk about books and topics that the main crew hasn't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book, and today I have with me Ceskykure, also known as Josh from the Libromancy podcast.
Hey.
And I also have with me Lammy Lams, also known as Mike, the host of the Cosmere Deep Dive podcast.
Hello.
And we are very excited to have an extra special guest and winner of a 2008 and 2013 Hugo Award, Mr. John Scalzi. We've been reviewing his Old Man War series, and we are glad to have him on to talk about Old Man War, his new book, The Kaiju Preservation Society, which came out on March 15th. So, welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Tell us about your new book, because that's why you're on a book tour, and that's why you're here.
I am on a book tour, and it's been quite the book tour, I have to say. So the way that I've been describing Kaiju Preservation Society is it's about friends, it's about science, it's about 150 meter creatures, and it's occasionally about nuclear explosions. So put all those together, and you got yourself a book.
Right?
Yeah. And a great book at that.
It was
really
loved
it.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been very, very happy with how it's been received so far. I mean, people seem to be really, really sort of enjoying it, which makes me super happy because, I mean, I really enjoyed writing it, and I was hoping that people would kind of get the same sort of like, this is meant to be fun sort of thing. But you never can tell. You have to wait until it goes out and people start reading it and see what they have to say about it.
Lammy has an intense question.
Okay.
All right. In the afterword for Kaiju Preservation Society, you said that you were trying to write a book and it just didn't come together, and then Kaiju happened and everything was good.
Yes.
I'm wondering, and I understand if you can't answer, I'm wondering if the book that didn't happen was Head On 3, because maybe you were in like the headspace of having a protagonist with, pronounless, no physical description, which is the case of Kaiju.
Sure.
Jamie.
Well, no, it wasn't actually the Lock-In series number 3. I am going to write a third book in that series. I am contractually obliged, but more than that, I want to go back into the series and write another one. No, it was an entirely different book. The way that I've been describing it to people was Das Boot in space, which means it was sort of dark and claustrophobic and gritty and political. And it turns out that 2020 was really, really not the right atmosphere to write something like that. But with regard to like the main character and descriptions and stuff like that, as it turns out, I mean, if you look at most of my work, it turns out that I don't do a whole lot of description unless there's something specific in the plot that requires the description to happen. And, it's on one sense I can say, well, it's a stylistic tick. But the real answer to that is that description bores me to write. And so I tend to avoid it just simply because I'm just, her hair was black, his arms were the size of a small poodle or whatever. It's just like it does nothing for me as a person and as a reader. So I just have a tendency to leave it out. It's not, I mean, it has the beneficial side effect of people then sort of fill in with their imagination what the people look like. On the other hand, the flip side of that is it's a legitimate criticism. Is like, why don't you describe them? I could, some people end up feeling like my books are basically what they call like a blank stage, right? And a lot of it will depend on one's own interest and ability to create images. One of the things that I found out recently is that there are people who exist in the world and who function perfectly normally, but who don't really have visual imagination, so to speak. Like they have no problems imagining things or doing any of that sort of stuff, but the idea of, unless the description is there or unless they have a really strong sense memory of like what an apple is or something like that, they just don't have visual representations in the brain. And that blew my mind because, of course, I don't have that problem.
So
Yeah.
do you read Charles
I have read Charles. I mean, there's a...
Because he's notorious.
No, and there are lots of people who are, all across the spectrum in terms of describing things. And there's also... I think that there's certain times and places where description is absolutely necessary and you can't hide from it. But also, I think there are some specific genres where description is part of what they come for. I mean, an epic fantasy, you do want that, good description of what everybody is wearing and what they're eating and what the place looks like and all that sort of stuff, because it is so a part of the genre. You could do without it, of course, but that's part of the fun, I think, for folks in specifically like epic fantasy.
Yeah. Okay, Chesky, your turn.
All right. I really enjoyed Kaiju Preservation Society, and one of my favorite scenes is when Jamie gets back from his expedition, his first one, and he's inducted into an order. What order would you be inducted in if you survived your first mission and then came
I've been
back?
asked this before, and I can't remember what I said, so it'll be completely new. I think it would be the order of I can't believe I'm still getting away with this crap. You know what I mean? 'Cause so one of the things that creative people have, or a lot of creative people have, is this thing that's called imposter syndrome, right? And the idea that sooner or later they're going to realize you're not a grown up, and they're going to come for you and be like, "I'm sorry, sir, you're not allowed to write anymore," and carry you away. And as they carry you away, you're like, "Oh, I guess that's fair." And so this is something that affects a lot of creative people. I have never had imposter syndrome for whatever reason. But what I do have, I think, is a related thing, which is I can't believe I'm still getting away with this. I can't believe that they haven't just been like, you. What do you think you're doing? In which case I would run as fast as I could. But so that is the thing that I imagine I would do. Like I would get recruited by the Kaiju Preservation Society, and I would be like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to ride this pony as long as they let me. And honestly, that's pretty much how I've lived my entire life. And it's worked out so far. One day I'm going to face plant possibly, or alternately be hit by a meteor in a massive karmic rebalancing. But until that point, I'm going to just keep doing it. I can't believe they haven't caught me yet.
No, I love that.
So, what's it like to have a book drop into your head?
It was amazing. Honestly, I got to tell you. So the background to this question is, while I was working on a previous 2020 book, which I wasn't able to finish, and in fact, basically, I eventually had to go tell my editor, I was like, I can't finish this book. And so then we were like, well, I guess we're not going to have something on the schedule. And then I took a shower, and all of Kaiju just downloaded into my brain all at once. And I've literally never had that happen before. I've had books where I knew where I wanted to go with it, and I knew how it started, and the middle was kind of fuzzy. But this was the one that genuinely, it just pretty much all dropped into the brain. And it was great, and I loved writing it because, one, it was easy because I knew exactly where the story was going pretty much all the time. And I got a little bit angry with my brain. I'm like, why can't you do this all the time? Why can't you just give me the whole story? So all I have to do is type. But then I remembered that it came at the end of literally a year of grinding my gears, and the ratio of pain versus pleasure in that particular scenario wasn't great. So I guess I'll just have to do it like I normally do, which is make it up as I go along and figure it out like a puzzle piece. But other than that, it was great. I mean, it really was a situation where I was like, I know what this story is, which was great because after blowing that other book, I was supposed to have that book in a few weeks.
While we're in off recording time, can I gush? I'd like to gush a little.
Wait, are we? What?
John,
Who are we gushing to,
your
and
books
why?
I'm gushing about you.
Yay! Okay.
Your books have the most consistent quality of like any author I've ever read. Like I love Robert Jordan. I love Wheel of Time. He drops some stinkers in there.
Sure.
No book of yours that I've read has ever been anything less than just incredibly entertaining and super fun and just
Well,
flows.
thank you. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that Tor locked me up on that big contract. Right? It was if they know one thing about me, I'm reliable, and that I have reasonable quality. And that's both good and bad. I mean, if you like what I like, then that's great. If you don't like what I like, then I'm never going to get any better for you, right? I've had people who are like, I've read 4 books by Scalzi now, and he just doesn't get any better. And I'm like, well, no, I probably won't. And stop, literally, just stop. Read somebody else because you will never be happy with me, right? So, and what can you do about that? You just kind of like, I'm not your cup of tea. There are literally hundreds of other writers. Give them a shot. Maybe you'll like them better.
Yeah, no, I haven't read a bad book from yours as well. I need to read more of your books, but there's so many out there.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, here I am.
So
I won't
what I
read that.
said is, what is it like for a book to drop into your head?
It was amazing because I've never had that happen before. I've always had the thing where I knew kind of the initiating thing and I knew where it was going to end and had some spots in the middle. And I would just write to find out how I would get from one to the next. But the idea of just having the complete story drop in was new for me. And also, frankly, a relief because, quite frankly, I blew writing a completely different novel before this, and then I was worried, and then we weren't going to have anything for the deadline, which meant that I was going to blow the shipping date, which I've never had happen before, and so I was kind of a mess. And I was, just wondering what was going to happen when my brain was like, oh, while you were panicking about that thing that you would never ever actually write, I was thinking about this whole different story, and here it is, wonk, and literally just the whole thing came in, and it was great because then I could just sit down and type it as opposed to write it, right? Because all the story was there, and could do that reasonably quickly from the start to finish. It took me 5 weeks to write Kaiju, which is on the short side for me. So it was great, and I wish that all of my books were like that, but I think most of the time I'll still have to actually work and write the whole book.
Yeah, well, 5 weeks is impressive for writing any kind of a book. I can't even imagine that. So,
It's not my record though. My record is 2 weeks,
Oh,
wow.
which I
what was that?
don't recommend. It was Consuming Fire, and that was literally, I looked at my calendar and I'm like, oh, my book deadline is this month because I thought it was a completely different time, and I had basically 2 weeks to write it. So I wrote 8,000 words a day. Now I'd been thinking about the book for a year, so it wasn't like, again, it was a lot of typing as opposed to writing per se, because I knew mostly where I wanted the story to go. But 8,000 words a day of typing is not something I would recommend for anyone. Literally, when it was done, my hands were twitchy and my brain was fried. Like I finished writing it and I turned it in, and my brain was such a mess. I was like, I'm going to go downstairs and watch Teen Titans Go, because Teen Titans Go is the level of ability that I have to focus. And 10 minutes later, I had to stop watching Teen Titans Go because it was way too busy for my brain. My wife tells me that it took me about a week before I could answer questions more than monosyllabically. So never write a book in 2 weeks, kids, even if you can do it, right? Just don't recommend it at all.
Okay. Regarding Kaiju Preservation Society, uh, how many references is too many? Because I feel like we were getting pretty close to the Star Trek TNG episode.
I don't know, and the thing is that I think that is a personal call. I mean, the thing about doing a story like Kaiju or a story like Red Shirts, or to go way, way back, something like Agent of the Stars, right? Um, is I think that everybody who exists in those universes gets what's going on, right? They know, it takes place in present time, more or less. Everybody gets the concepts that are being discussed. Everybody gets all the inside references and stuff. And it was always growing up, it was always something that bothered me, where you would have something in current time, and nobody knew about werewolves or vampires. and they have this movie where people are like, somebody was sucking this man's blood. Who could it have been? This has never happened before. And you're like, dude, vampires, they've existed forever. But that was the universe where apparently vampires had never ever existed. I don't build those universes. I find them absolutely unrealistic. So, like, for example, in the Kaiju Preservation Society, they do the thing that when they arrive at the base, as part of the we're at the base now welcoming ceremony, they play kaiju movies. They played Godzilla and Pacific Rim, right? Which, by the way, I took directly from what the overseas people at the Antarctica bases do. Like, they have the winter over people, the people who stay there during the winter, when most everybody else is gone. And when they start wintering over, apparently they all get together and they watch The Thing, right? But you're like, how do you do that? And the answer is because they know, right? They are in on their own joke. And that's the whole thing is that everybody in this universe is in on the joke of this is absolutely ridiculous, and so clearly we're going to reference kaiju movies and what we picture as that. And so, yeah, for some people, even one reference is too much for them. For other people, they're like, I can't believe you didn't talk about, and then insert deeply obscure kaiju here, all this sort of stuff. They exist on a spectrum. And I think I'm somewhere near a little more references than not sort of angle of things.
Neil Stevenson, his main character named.
Right. I mean, the whole thing about, starting it off, and definitely you start off with the Neil Stevenson references and have one character get it and the other one absolutely not. And that tells you something about who they are in respect to that world. Like, how could you not have read Neil Stevenson? And the answer is a surprising number of people out there in the world haven't read Neil Stevenson, which is inexplicable to all us nerds. And yet,
I've not read it. I've not. I'm sorry. Am I fired now?
Oh my God. Leave now and never come back. No, and it's fine because that just means that you get a chance to read it for the first time.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, Ceskykure.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I know that Old Man's War is kind of a fanfic of Starship Troopers, and Red Shirts is obviously a little bit of a fanfic of, Star Trek.
A little bit.
Okay, it's more than a little bit, but did Kaiju Preservation kind of have the same roots as it kind of started with like a fanfic of Kaiju and Godzilla and then kind of morph into its own story? Or, what makes you kind of start with the fan fiction base and then turn it into an amazing book, that's separate but not?
In the case of Kaiju, I really don't know because, like I said, it just popped into my brain. I was literally in the shower and my brain said, Kaiju Preservation Society. And then, plonk, there it was. But I think in a more general sense, I mean, look, my very first job out of college was as a film critic, right? And and then prior to that, I had been doing music reviews, and I did music reviews later, and I did video game reviews, and I've basically been immersed in professionally and as a geek in the common culture for as long as I can remember. And again, it's not in me to pretend that these cultural antecedents to my work don't exist, right? I'm not going to pretend like Star Trek doesn't exist. I'm not going to pretend that Starship Troopers doesn't exist, And, with regard to Old Man's War in particular, the way that I pitched it to people when they were like, what's your book about? I said, it's Starship Troopers, but with old people, There's a reason why in the afterword to Old Man's War, I explicitly say, thank you, Robert Heinlein, for deaths that should be obvious, right? Because if I didn't, like, literally every nerd would be like, that's really a lot like Starship Troopers. I'm like, yeah. I stand on the shoulder of giants, right? Whether it's Robert Heinlein or Gene Roddenberry or the folks who created Godzilla. The director's last name is Honda, but at the moment I can't remember the first name. And I'm perfectly willing to say that's where I am. I am not at the head of the line in creating the golden age of science fiction. I am 3 or 4 generations back, and I don't have any problem acknowledging and remixing the culture in which I grew up in and exist in order to take a new spin at it. And I think any hesitancy to do so in my particular case would come off as kind of false. Now, to be clear, this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. There are going to be people who will be like, you're just redoing Heinlein. What's wrong with you? And that's fair. If you really just feel like I'm wholesale ripping off Heinlein or Gene Roddenberry or kaiju movies, there's nothing that I'm going to be able to convince you otherwise, because it's all there in the text. But I think you make the point of it. The point is not to pretend that I am not a child of all of these things. The point is to take them and in a Hegelian fashion, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, make something new out of them and give it to the next generation of writers as part of their common culture and see where they take it from there.
Well,
Yeah, no, it's great.
So that the reason why we're doing Old Man's War is Lammy sold it to me as Starship Troopers with old people.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that is the reason I read it.
Yeah.
And the
But
only other book I had read before that was Red Shirts, which
Sure.
I read because it was Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love that.
Yeah, it's nice having that cultural kind of knowledge that, like, even if you don't know 100%, everybody kind of knows about Star Trek, and so it's that shared kind of start to the book. So yeah.
Well, in the same way, I mean, not everybody knows what a kaiju is per se, but they know Godzilla, they know the Japanese movies, they know the modern spins on it, and all of these sorts of things. So this is a thing that, like I've said before, I mean, there are certain things that I do particularly well. One of the things that I've mentioned before is that I wouldn't say that what I do in the realm of the science fiction genre is particularly original. That's, where I'm making a whole new universe in ways that have been unexpected. For example, like Nora Jemisin does with The Broken Earth, right? What Nora is doing with that is something that is kind of epoch making, right? And that's fantastic. And that's not what I do. What I do is I take the stuff that we know and I reassemble it and I give it a different spin and put it back on the table, so to speak. And I think the great thing about science fiction today is that there is absolutely room for the innovators, which are people like Nora, and there's room for the remixers, who are people like me. And it's not to say that I don't ever do anything original or that Nora doesn't remix things, right? But it's the balance of what we do and how we do it. Like I said, the great thing is right now you can get the whole spread and you can enjoy it all, and it's all part of the great buffet of what's available right now.
Go ahead, Lammy.
No, it's yours next.
Is it? Is mine next? No. Oh, so do we think we're gonna get a movie of Old Man's War or any of your books? But Old Man's War is the one I want.
So Old Man's War is at Netflix right now, and it's in development. And and it's been in development there for a few years.
A few years? That's not very hopeful.
Well, no, actually, here's there are pluses and there are minuses, right? The minus is Old Man's War has been in development in one way or another for 14 years now, right? Which first it was at Paramount Pictures, then it was at Sci-Fi Channel, where they're going to make it a TV series.
Oh no!
And then
I'm glad
they got moved over to Netflix, where they're going to make it a movie, but it's going to be a Netflix movie. And Development is a very long process, and I don't think that people often get how long they can be. I mean, it took them 30 years to develop Dune into a movie, and then it took them another 30 years to develop it into another movie, actually 40 years, right? Starship Troopers was in development for 40 years before it was made into a movie. All of these things end up taking time. I want them to make a movie out of it, absolutely. On the other hand, 14 years of options paid for my daughter's college, so I really can't, right? So
Yeah, those options are very nice.
yeah, the options work out. The options are someone knocks on your door and says, "Here's a basket of money that you did absolutely nothing to earn. Have a nice day." And you're like, "Woohoo! This is great." So I will say this much. I have reason to be fairly optimistic at this point that Netflix will do something with Old Man's War, and that what they will end up doing will be okay. But again, it's hard to say. I mean, it's been 14 years. It might be 15. It might be 16. It might be 20. You just have to take it as it happens. And then I have other things that are under option as well. The Interdependency series is under option right now. The Dispatcher series is under option. And I have other things that are under option that I can't talk about right at the moment. I have the Love, Death, and Robots series. The third volume of that's going to come out hopefully this year. I have another episode in there. So it is what it is. We would all like for something to be made, but unlike when I write a novel, which is literally me in a room and then handing it off to an editor, straight from the beginning, there's a dozen people. And then as it goes into production, all of a sudden it balloons up to thousands. There are so many ways for things not to ever happen. Like I said, the good news is while things aren't happening, I still get paid.
So you're fairly hands off as far as the adaptation process is. You're not going to Clive Cussler this.
Well, I mean, damn, that's a cold cut right there. And I totally get what you mean by that. But so I'm typically speaking some sort of producer on everything that gets optioned, either a consulting producer or an executive producer or some other sort of producer. And we do that for the specific reason of we want to know what they're doing. We want them to respond to what when we ask them, "Hey, what are you doing?" And we also want them to show us their work. And then when I have comments or questions, we want to be able to have those heard and get answered respectively. Now, that being said, I'm a novelist. I'm not that's my job. One of the great benefits of getting older, right, is recognizing that you're not necessarily going to be a genius at everything that you do, right? And that a great pleasure in life is working with people that you trust to be really good at their job. The good news is for each of the things that I have under development, I generally believe that the people that I'm working with are good people who know what they're doing, are competent, and are willing to put in the work. Now, every piece of writing of mine that gets optioned, they're not going to be made into the novel is not going to be made directly into the movie or TV series. There has to be an adaptation. That being the case, the best people to do that adaptation are people who have experience and knowledge in that field, who know how to parcel it out into 10 episodes or 12 episodes or 6 episodes or 2 hours or 2.5 hours, which are not necessarily things that I directly, particularly at the very beginning of things, had any experience with. Now, 15 years on, and having written scripts and having done this, a reasonable amount, I have more competence than I did. But even that brings the point home to me that I want people who are, I want people to be doing that stuff and be coming to me for and to get questions answered and to get my input rather than to try to do them all myself, because rumor has it I've got at least 7 more books on my contract with Tor that I really kind of have to get to. So in those particular cases, working with people, understanding it's a collaborative process as opposed to just an individual process, and not worrying about that my vision is going to be compromised. I mean, my vision has to be compromised because my vision was a book, a novel, which is not the same as a TV show or movie or a video game or a graphic novel or whatever. Whatever format it gets changed into, there will have to be an adaptation. So yeah, no, I'm involved, but I also understand that I don't know everything, and I think that that's really important. The other thing, quite honestly, is way back when Old Man's War was back at Paramount, right? And they gave me a producer whose job clearly was hold the hand of the nervous writer, right? That was their job. And they were talking about, this is awesome. We're all really excited. There will have to be changes. And I said to them, I said, look, I want you to make a movie that when people who've loved the book go in to see it, they say, I can see that you've made changes, but I understand why you've made the changes. And the feeling that I got from reading the novel is the same as the feeling that I get from this movie. So that's okay. And then I said, but if you can't do that, then make a movie that makes a shitload of money so that I can sell 1 million copies of Old Man's War, and then I can cry in my hot tub full of cash. So, that's basically my standard at this point. Is like, do a good job, or just be so massively successful that I can't complain anyway.
I'm just imagining you like Scrooge McDuck
diving into the thing, into the big thing of coins. That would hurt, because he's diving into coins, right?
I was very confused by that as a child.
Yeah, it's like there's some physics involved there that involves Scrooge McDuck getting a broken neck, but it's a cartoon. Anyway. We're gonna let it go.
So we've got several like just weird questions.
Bring them.
But we want to know. It's from our Discord, and we're going to start with me saying, how did you land such a hot wife?
The answer to that, because she is unbelievably hot, and she's also the model in both physicality and temperament for Jane Sagan in the Old Man's War series, right? Just in case you didn't know that. The answer is I know how to dance. I took 2 years of jazz and modern dance in high school. And when I was working for a newspaper in Central California, I was doing a story on a local DJ, and it was a day in the life of a DJ thing, right? And one of the things the DJ did was she went to a nightclub that was one town down from where I lived. And she was just doing, doing DJ stuff. And I figured as long as I was there watching her put CDs into the speaker, I might as well dance. And I was just going up to women and saying, would you like to dance? Would you like to dance? Just purely to dance. I wasn't like trying to hit on them or anything like that. Unbeknownst to me, Chrissy comes in with her date, and sees me on the dance floor. Her date turns out to be a dud who doesn't want to dance, and she wants to dance. So later on, I'm standing there, against the wall, like drinking my soda, and literally the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And remember, at this time, I'm interviewing movie stars, so I have some basis for comparison. Comes up to me. And she says, I saw you dancing earlier. You and I have to dance sometime tonight. To which I said, now is good. And we started dancing. And then at the end of it, I gave her my business card. I said, let's do this again. We went on our first official date, and that was June 16th, 1993. June 15th, 1994, I proposed. And June 17th, 1995, we got married. So we have a 3-day anniversary date there. But it all was down to the fact that she saw me dancing and was like, I gotta dance with that guy. And it was really funny because when I took her down to meet my friends from high school, they all had that same reaction. How did you manage this? And I was like, remember how you all mocked me for being in dance class? Who's laughing now, pal?
Oh, that's a great story. That is amazing. Okay.
I love it. All right, I've got a question for you. In your afterword, you said that Kaiju Preservation Society is kind of like a pop song.
Yeah.
What would you classify your other books as? Like Old Man's War or the Lock-In series? What kind of
Oh,
music are they?
what kind of music? That's an interesting question. Um, well, to some extent, I have some answers for that because a lot of my songs are a lot of my books have actually songs that I've commissioned for them, right? So, for example, Red Shirts has a Jonathan Colton song called Red Shirt that I commissioned for it when it was released. So that's clearly a Jonathan Colton song. Um, there's a musician named William Beckett who is in this band called The Academy Is in the early part of the 21st century, who did two of the songs for the Lock-In series. So those two, I think, are very indicative of that. The Old Man's War series, uh, it's been kind of interesting because I one of the things that I'm kind of wanting to do at some point, because the 20th anniversary of Old Man's work is not that far away. It would be 2025. Is maybe do have a thing where I do an album of songs that were inspired by the Old Man's War series in one way or another, which on one hand is completely arrogant, but on the other hand would be kind of cool. And I would love to be able to like go to some musicians that I know and some that I respect but don't know, and be like, what you think that what you think this would be if it was set to music. That's what I would love to hear. So we got some time. Maybe we'll find out what that is. But certainly, with respect of kaiju, it was very much when I was thinking about it. I was actually thinking of pop punk, right? Um, so I think that that's where I would go with that particular one.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. That's a great. Love hearing that.
Yeah.
You have a question, Lammy, don't you?
What skills have you been forced to learn that you had no idea would be required before you got published?
Um, the well, actually, I think the thing that I've learned through publishing is to learn to trust people to be competent. Really, when I was younger, I was like, I have to do everything myself. And as I've gotten older, I've realized one, I'm not good at doing everything. That there are some things that I'm bad at, and then other things that I'm not bad at, but I don't like doing, and that I'm really happy that somebody else will do them for me. So learning to actually trust that other people will actually do a good job was something that I didn't know that I would need to learn. As far as the thing about being a novelist is concerned. Now it's worked out very well for me. I've learned to trust copy editors. Like I am famously someone who doesn't use the Oxford comma, right? Right? No, 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 don't, no. The and that's because I was in journalism. We use the AP comma, which where you eliminate the comma at the end of a serial. But
This is shameful.
no,
I'm
no, 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 no. I will stand behind it. That said, all my copy editors use the Oxford comma, and so when they introduce them, instead of just like steadying them out of existence, I'll be like, okay, does this actually make sense here? And a lot of the time, it will actually make sense to have the Oxford comma in there, and I have to admit it. So that's a small example. Another example of things that I would be terrible at. I had for the longest time no idea why cover art works the way that it does, and so trusting cover artists, not only cover artists, but the art directors and everything else, to know why they are making the cover the way that they are making the cover and how they are making the cover, because it's commercial art and it's not just for readers, it's also for booksellers. All of this stuff are things that I was surprised to learn, but happy to learn. I feel after about 20 years of being in publishing, I feel I have a better grip on these things.
Great.
So I want all of us to answer this question. This is from Befuddled Panda. Would you rather ride a giraffe or an elephant to work?
My work is literally 15 feet away from where I sleep, so
Pretend you have the grocery store.
with the grocery store. I would prefer the elephant, especially if I'm going to the grocery store, because I've got packages, right? Also, giraffes aren't designed to be ridden by humans. I mean, neither are elephants. But no animal is that we haven't domesticated and completely reformed was designed for our specifications. Anyway, that said, an elephant is an SUV. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Chesky?
I'm going to have to also go with an elephant because riding it on an elephant would look way cooler than riding it on a giraffe with me swinging wildly about its neck as I try to hold on.
Lammy?
I got to go giraffe. They have cool tongues and fuzzy horns. They're great.
So I guess Lammy's going to be the only man to say anything about giraffes, because I would go with an elephant because it just looks so more comfy. Those the ridge on the back of a giraffe and it's slanted way back, it just doesn't look like it would be comfortable to sit on.
Right. No, I mean, well, this is the whole thing. Is just like, why are you riding an animal in the first place? Are you doing it because you want to look cool as hell? In which case, sure, the giraffe. Why not? Right?
Yeah,
Because
Lammy wins. On
way
looking
way to
cool.
make your presence known. But if you are like utilitarian, like I got things to haul, I gotta take the kids to school, all of this sort of stuff, then yes, you're gonna go with an elephant. So
Cool. Kipton, one of our friends there, asked, who's the author you'd most like to collaborate with, living or dead, anybody?
the answer I always give to this is no one. And the reason is I'm not fit as a human being to collaborate with other people. And I wouldn't wish to inflict myself on others in that regard. I think I would be a terrible, terrible collaborator. In that respect, I respect all my living friends. I respect too much for that, and all the dead people that I admire, I think would be incensed. That said, I mean, I did rewrite Little Fuzzy, so and in some ways that would be, I guess you could call that a collaboration. But yeah, generally speaking, yeah, I no, I'm an awful person to work with. So it's just I wouldn't do that I wouldn't do that to my friends. I wouldn't do that to my friends. Now, of course, this quote will come to bite me in my ass. If I ever decide to collaborate with someone, well, you said that you were horrible to work with. And then they'll ask the person that I worked with, was he horrible to work with? And they'll be like, yes, he was literally the worst. It's a miracle I didn't set him on fire.
It's a valid answer.
It is.
I mean, self-knowledge is really, really important, right?
It is.
If you know that you're not a great person to collaborate with, you got to warn people, because people will come up to me and they're like, we should totally collaborate, and I'll be like, no.
How does your editor feel then, if you're so terrible to work with?
I mean, but that's a different relationship, right?
Okay.
I mean, it is a different relationship.
That's
I mean,
fair.
let me admit, like, for example, if I were collaborating with someone, I would have to be basically the captain of the ship, right? Because in fact, I have collaborated with people when we did the Metatropolis, right? Which was a collection of stories that I did with Toby Backel, Jay Lake, Elizabeth Bear, and Carl Schrader, right? we created the world of the book, and then we all wrote stories in the book, and we were showing each other the stories as we were writing them, so that we would take little bits and pieces from the individual universes, our individual stories, and put them in our own stories as well. But the thing was, I was the editor of that, so I was always the guy driving the bus, and so what situation, right? And so that's kind of where I'm going with that.
So, let's see. Coding Foo says, what books are you looking forward to reading? And are you looking forward to new books by any other authors?
I mean, the books that I've been telling people, because I get asked this question a lot, so I made sure that I had books ready to go, because in the moment I always blank. Like, what are you reading? What do you like? It's like, oh. I've been telling people the books that I actually have been reading and recommending recently are that have all just come out like in the last year are Actual Star by Monica Byrne, Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi, and then The Cartographers by Punk Shepherd, which came out the same day that Kaiju came out, which I read, in my downtime when I was on the tour. In terms of like what's coming up, literally there are so many books that I'm excited about, because this sounds obnoxious, but I know so many writers at this point. Like literally, like I know almost everybody in science fiction fantasy. One of the benefits of having been the president of SIFWA, and then just being the gregarious dude that I am, is like I know everybody, and so they all have books coming out, and I'm like, cool, I want to read it. And then the question is, when do I have time to read them all? And sometimes people are like, have you read my book? How is it? I'm like, it's amazing. It's the book you were meant to write. And, and I haven't read it. I am reading, Morris Broadus has a new book out, and I'm reading it literally, not literally as we speak, but when I'm done, I will go back to reading it, because I'm having an event with him tomorrow. And here's a hot tip. If you're having an event with another author, really useful to have read their book, because otherwise you look like a dick. So
I'm going to have to beep so much in this episode.
Not so much.
I mean, but really, it's like I've read your book. Oh yeah, and so your book, does it? Did you write verbs too? You don't want to be that guy. You want to actually talk substantively about the book that they have on hand.
Lammy, do you have a question to ask?
Sure. I'll take Red's. Red asks, do you have a cast list in mind for Old Man's War? Any actors, living or dead, that you would like to see playing some of the main roles?
No, and I'll tell you why, which is especially because this has been in development for 14 years, right? And so, like in 2008, when it first got optioned, and they were asking me, who do you think should do this or that or something else? And I gave them my casting list. At this point, they're all way too old, right?
But we're going to pretend that they can time travel.
They're all way too old, or they're all way too young, so to speak. And so at this point, I avoid fan casting simply because it'll end in heartbreak, right? Because especially if you have definitively cast someone in your brain as a character, and then some other actor has to take that role, then you'll, in some point in your brain, will just never be satisfied with the actual casting as opposed to the the casting that you have in your head. So I'm willing to be surprised, or at the very least wait until they are actually at the point where they're casting. The other thing is also the realities of it is, who you can cast depends on who wants to play it and who's available and how much money you have. Like if Old Man's War gets produced for $50 million, who we get is different than if it's produced for $250 million, right?
Right.
And so all these things are things that you have to sort of factor in. And since I know that in my brain is like, oh, hold off on casting that until. The only time that I ever did any sort of casting in my brain was honestly for Love, Death, and Robots. They bought my short story When the Yogurt Took Over, and And I said to them, you know who would be awesome to narrate this story? Maurice LaMarche, the guy who does the brain, and Pinky and the Brain and Father and
Oh,
Kids Next Door and
oh,
all that sort of stuff.
Blasphemy.
yeah.
And so they hired him. They went and they got Maurice LaMarche to do it, and literally that was one of the most squee-inducing moments of my life. But the important point of that is that they had already bought the story and they were already in the process of making it, so that when I made that recommendation, we knew that they were going to make it anyway, and that was kind of the important thing there.
I've got one of the last ones, I think. Do you ever handwrite your books, or is it all typing?
I mean, you can't see the look of horror that's on my face right now, folks. But so I started writing short stories literally the same year the very first Macintosh came out, right? My friend Ezra Chwakey, his parents bought him one of the Macs, and I basically moved into his room, and just short stories. I was like 14. It was freshman year in high school. So literally all of my creative writing has been on a computer. That's how my brain is wired. For example, when I'm writing, I don't write multiple drafts, right? Because you can edit your document as you go along when you're writing on a computer. And so literally all my books, I've had that sort of rolling edit, so that when I type the end, um, I will do a quick spell check of the last chapter, and then I'll send it off 10 minutes later. And that's it. Technically it's a first draft, but in realistically, all the drafting has been done as I go along, because you can do that on the computer. You can't do that if you're typing or if you're writing by hand. My hand just cramps up even thinking about doing something like that. And there are people who swear by it. Neil Stevenson famously wrote the Quicksilver series, or the Baroque series, with like a quill, and that's
I
just.
hear that. I hear that Shakespeare also did that.
Well, yeah, but Shakespeare didn't
Famously.
have a computer, did he? Did he? And if he had a computer, he'd be using that thing. So, as far as it goes, I mean, I am sorry that Will had to sit there and keep dipping his quill into the ink. I don't have to do that. And the people who are like, well, I want to write it out by hand. I'm like, go with God. I want you to do your process the way you do your process, because your process is not my process, but my process is definitely, I'm doing that on a computer. Like even just doing it on typewriter, where like literally cutting and pasting was literally cutting and pasting, things onto, and then having to rekey the entire document. No, no, no. I
Yeah.
would no. I would not be. I don't know that I would be a novelist if I had to do all of that again, because I'm the world's laziest person. So
Well, now it's time for shameless plugs.
okay.
John, do you have anything that you're selling?
The rumor has it that there's a new kind of book that I have out called the Kaiju Preservation Society, and that it is available in bookstores everywhere. I will have more stuff coming out later in the year, but we have not officially announced it yet, so I can't talk about that. But I have lots of backlists too, so if you like kaiju, I have literally like 15 or 16 other novels, plus novellas, plus nonfiction books. I just don't ever stop writing. So, Twitter handle, I was about to say, or you can find me online. My website, whatever.scalzi.com, has been there for 23 years now. So there's lots of stuff to read there. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter constantly at Scalzi.
Lammy, where can people find you?
Every week I host the Cosmere Deep Dive podcast, which goes into Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere series, and you can find the Twitter account for that as @CosmereCast.
Chesky, where can people find you?
Yeah, I do the Libromancy podcast. It's just 15 minutes of me usually gushing about books that I've read, just trying to keep it light and fun. And you can find me at Libromancy Pod on Twitter.
And also on Green Team Discord.
And yep, on
Yeah.
Green Team Discord.
So you can find me on the Legendarium Discord. I'm the keeper of the calendar for Green Team, but I also have a podcast that's going to be coming out soon that's short science fiction. You cannot find me on Twitter because I hate social media, even though John is a delightful follow. So thanks so much for joining us. The music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. You can find us on the Legendarium Discord. The invite link is on thelegendarium.com. We're also on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Join us in supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. Thanks, Craig, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire, and a shout out to Horizon Brave for starting it all. And thank you, Chesky, and guest host Lammy, and our very special guest host, John Scalzi. I'm Little Red Buck. Until next time, bye!